Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel where we share thrilling tales that keep you on the edge of your seat. In our story's last moment, we witnessed that tense beep from Zalyra's improvised transmitter, indicating someone in orbit has intercepted her signal. Could it be her allies or the ones who sabotaged her ship? To find out what happens, make sure you listen to the entire story all the way to the end. If you enjoy captivating science fiction, please hit that subscribe button right now. Your support motivates us to bring you even more exciting adventures. Also, we'd love to hear your opinions, theories, and favorite moments. So don't hesitate to drop a comment below. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Every bit of feedback matters and helps us craft better stories just for you. Now let's continue and see how Chiron and Zalyra handle the unknown contact. Chiron had never been a fan of winter. The endless swirl of snow outside his narrow living room window, the constant moaning of wind through the rattling panes, and the biting chill that seeped into his old apartment walls made him wish he could hibernate until spring. Yet here he was, half dozing on his thrift store couch, the worn-out blanket pulled tight around his shoulders as he tried to ignore the howling blizzard outside. He was on the verge of dozing off completely when the pounding on his door came, each echoing thud demanding immediate attention. At first, he thought it might be a neighbor who'd locked themselves out, or a delivery gone wrong, anything but what it truly was. Still groggy, Chiron dragged himself upright, heart thumping in time with the knocks that refused to relent. Then he heard the voice. "Human, please, let me in." The words were urgent, breathless, distinctly feminine and oddly melodic despite the desperation. Chiron froze, hands still pressed to the couch cushion as though that anchoring point could somehow keep reality from spiraling away. Whoever was outside wasn't just knocking, they were practically hammering the door down. Another harsh gust rattled the windows, and he wondered if the whole building might shake itself to pieces before the night was through. He hesitated, uneasy thoughts swirling. Could it be a prank? A random stranger needing shelter in a storm? Or someone with far more dubious intentions? Any normal person would have simply called the authorities, but the unmistakable terror lacing that voice tore at his instincts. A muffled thud followed, softer this time, like a body slumping against the door. Suddenly, caution felt secondary to human decency. He hurried to the door, unlatched it, but kept the chain in place, and opened it a crack. That was when Chiron's entire worldview crashed like a wave over fragile sandcastles. The woman, no, she wasn't exactly a woman, looked up at him, her dark blue skin shining in the weak hallway light. Her hair, near white with pearlescent undertones, clung to the sides of her face and neck. She was shivering so violently it appeared her teeth might shatter. A long, sleek tail curled around her bare legs, its tip twitching as though it had a mind of its own. Her lips parted, revealing a set of pale, trembling features that were unmistakably alien. "Please," she gasped, eyes an otherworldly shade of gold and wide with desperation. "I'm freezing, human." The last word came out broken, almost lost to the frigid air. Chiron's rational mind hiccuped. He wanted to ask if she'd escaped some lab. He wanted to demand answers. But the immediate reality was this. Her body looked moments away from shutting down, and she was half wrapped in what seemed like a stolen shower curtain. If she stayed outside any longer, she might truly collapse. In a flurry of adrenaline and half-formed decisions, Chiron slid the chain free and yanked the door wide open. "Get in," he ordered, bracing himself for whatever might come next. She stumbled across the threshold, tail dragging, and then half fell onto his couch, her limbs going limp with exhaustion. With the door slammed shut behind her and the warmth of the apartment already starting to envelop them both, Chiron realized that this night would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The first few seconds after the door slammed were a blur of frantic motion and clashing emotions. Chiron rummaged for an extra blanket, his heart thundering in his chest. How could he be calm when an honest-to-goodness alien, blue skin, glowing eyes, and everything, was trembling on his second-hand couch? Every flicker of her tail and each chattering breath forced him to confront just how impossible this situation should have been. Yet here it was in living color, in the same cramped studio where he usually ate cold pizza and scrolled aimlessly on his phone. He found a heavy quilt at the back of his closet and hastened to drape it over her. "The woman I am, and now I'm in, alien flinched at first, but then she all but burrowed into the fabric, letting out a ragged sigh that carried an undercurrent of pain. For a moment their eyes met. Hers seemed luminous with relief and an underlying fear, as if she wasn't sure whether she had just escaped one threat only to walk into another. "I'm Chiron," he blurted out, though introducing himself felt absurdly trivial. "You need heat, a hot drink, something." "Zalyra," she said, almost in a whisper. The name rolled off her tongue with a fluid grace that suggested a different linguistic structure, as though her entire mouth and vocal cords were designed for a language far beyond Earth's. Then Zalyra added in a breathy rush, "I need warmth, quickly." Without a second thought, Chiron flung open his cupboards, scrambling to find some instant hot chocolate, or maybe a packaged soup. He realized with a spike of guilt that he had nothing especially nutritious to offer. He lived on a shoestring budget, so his pantry mostly contained ramen packets, stale cereal, and questionable coffee. Grabbing whatever was on hand, he set the kettle to boil and shot worried glances over his shoulder. She was so still, except for the unstoppable trembling. Her once luminescent eyes had dulled slightly, like a candle flickering behind frosted glass. He wondered if her species was particularly vulnerable to cold, because in his mind, a being who'd mastered interstellar travel shouldn't be undone by a little Earth snowstorm, unless it wasn't just a little anything to her. Zalyra's presence forced Chiron to confront an immediate conundrum. Was he safe letting a complete stranger, let alone an extraterrestrial, into his apartment? Had she brought unintended danger to his doorstep? Was she some advanced scout for an alien force, or truly just a single traveler in distress? Beneath the swirl of possible conspiracies, deeper questions pressed in. If she needed help this desperately, what kind of moral obligation did he have, as a fellow living being, to give it to her without hesitation? Once the kettle whistled, Chiron filled the largest mug he owned with water and dropped in a packet of instant soup mix. Hastening back to the couch, he offered it to her, practically kneeling by her side. Zalyra took it in both hands, her blue fingers trembling so much she nearly spilled it. The moment the steam touched her face, some of the fear in her posture seemed to soften. She sipped, exhaling a faint sound of relief. Despite everything, a blizzard outside, an alien on his couch, and his own heart pounding like a jackhammer, Chiron felt a surreal wash of calm settle over him. "I owe you," Zalyra managed softly, golden eyes flicking up to meet his. "You have saved me. My people, do not forget such debts easily." He pressed a towel into her hands before she could get lost in her own explanation. "Let's just focus on getting you warm," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Then we can figure everything else out." Warmth arrived in increments. The apartment's heater worked overtime, the hot soup added internal heat, and the heavy blankets seemed to do the rest. Little by little, Zalyra's shivers subsided, her breathing steadied, and color returned to her face, albeit that radiant, alien blue hue that both mesmerized and unsettled Chiron. As soon as she had enough strength to speak in full sentences, her voice took on a carefully measured quality, like someone used to command or negotiation. "How did you—" Chiron started to ask but trailed off, uncertain how to phrase the laundry list of questions swirling in his mind. "How did you get there, Chiesa? Why are you alone? Are there others? Will the government come crashing through my door?" Zalyra pulled the quilt tighter around her, tail curling near her feet. "I was traveling in orbit around your planet. My vessel malfunctioned and brought me down hard. I survived the crash, but—" She gestured around at the snow, wind, and sub-zero reality. "Your environment is extreme for me." It baffled him that any species capable of advanced space travel could be so susceptible to cold. Yet here she was. "How long were you out there?" he asked carefully. "Long enough to realize I would die if I didn't find shelter," Zalyra replied. The directness of her words sent a quiet chill through Chiron. "You answered, so we'd beg for entry. Now I live." That last statement hammered home just how close to a fatal end she might have been. Karen shoved away an involuntary flash of guilt and breathed out. "Right. Well, sorry if my couch isn't a five-star hotel. I can turn up the heat or get you more blankets if you need." She looked around the modest living area, a clutter of gaming consoles, a small bookshelf, and a cheap coffee table stacked with old magazines. "It is sufficient," she said solemnly, as though evaluating a shelter's viability rather than passing any aesthetic judgment. Though, perhaps you might share your own warmth? Chiron nearly choked. What do you mean? Zalyra's gaze shifted, a faint flush creeping across her cheeks, darkening the blue. Your heating device is slow. My species is built for warmth. Intimacy with a heat source speeds recovery. It took him a few seconds to register that she was basically asking him to cuddle with her in the name of survival. Surprise, confusion, and a rush of awkwardness battled in his thoughts. Then he remembered the severity of her condition. If she needed direct body warmth, this wasn't about some bizarre proposition. It was biology. He cleared his throat, edging closer. I mean, sure, if that helps, just, don't bite or whatever. A tremor of what might have been laughter passed through her. We do not typically bite, she said quietly, letting him wrap an extra blanket around both of them. As he tentatively put an arm around her shoulders, the chill radiating off her was startling, like frost layering her skin. Thank you, she murmured. Chiron closed his eyes for a moment and tried to focus on the surreal truth. He was pressed up against a real alien, in the middle of a blizzard, sharing body heat so she wouldn't die. If this had been a dream, it would have been the strangest one of his life. Minutes blurred as Chiron tried to keep his mind from spiraling. Zalyra smelled faintly sweet, like some exotic flower overlaid with the tang of ozone, and the warmth of the blankets cocooned them both in a haze of near silence. Outside, the wind still howled, shaking the windows, but inside, the only sound was the soft hum of the furnace fan and the slightest chatter of Zalyra's teeth as her body fought to regain equilibrium. When her trembling eased, he ventured to speak. So, he began, his voice low, your ship, where did it land? Do you know? A slight flicker in her gaze told him she was hesitant to share too much. Still, she answered, I crashed west of here, beyond the buildings of your settlement, into a stretch of woodland. The cold forced me to abandon it and find help. That's how I ended up at your door. Chiron considered how he might respond if the roles were reversed, if he'd crashed on an alien planet and needed to rely on a complete stranger. He supposed he'd also be cagey. If you want, once the storm calms down, we can check your ship. Maybe it's fixable. Zalyra's eyes sparked with a fleeting hope. Yes, if the central systems aren't damaged, I might repair it. But if the main power core is compromised, the damage could be... She cut herself off, an undercurrent of worry plain in her voice. Severe, she finished. He took a moment before speaking again, noticing how her tail had coiled protectively around her ankles. You said you'd reward me, Karen said, voice oddly steady despite the weirdness of it all. What did you mean by that? She drew a controlled breath. Among my people, a life debt is not lightly given. You saved me from certain death by exposure, so I owe you a considerable favor. Could be advanced medical technology, or knowledge, or credits, if those hold any value to humans. Chiron snorted softly. Credits? Like alien money? Zalyra nodded matter-of-factly as though it were the most obvious answer in the world. My people engage in commerce with numerous civilizations. Ours is one of many currencies. Though if you prefer intangible rewards, such as advanced star mapping or shared scientific knowledge, that can be arranged too. He almost wanted to laugh at the stark contrast. Her official sounding tone clashed with the raw intimacy of being pressed side by side under a blanket. Then again, the prospect of having access to off-world technology or knowledge was mind-boggling. The relief in knowing Zalyra was genuinely grateful, and not just using him, created an unexpected bond. In the short term, that bond was forged by mere necessity, but it hinted at bigger implications. If an alien owed him something of value, and if her species truly had advanced tech, how would that shape his future? For Chiron, it was a flash of possibility. Maybe his humdrum life could pivot in a direction he'd only read about in science fiction. Brushing the thoughts aside, he guided her to drink more soup. Her breathing was no longer labored, though he could still sense a trace of pain in her posture. Is there anyone else like you? He asked quietly. Searching for you, maybe? Zalyra's gaze wandered toward the window, unreadable. I'm not sure, she admitted. My ship malfunctioned suddenly, without obvious cause. I fear sabotage. If so, the ones responsible might be closer than I wish. That possibility hung in the air, cutting through the settled calm and reintroducing the sting of danger. They stayed huddled for a time, the living room lamplight casting elongated shadows across the walls. The last of Zalyra's tremors eased, and she eased away from Chiron, though she remained close enough to share warmth. "What if they come looking for you?" he asked, deciding it was better to rip the bandage off than wallow in unspoken dread. Her dark lashes lowered. "They might. If they sabotage the vessel, they'd want to confirm its occupant was dealt with. The idea of armed, possibly hostile aliens stomping through his neighborhood was enough to make Kyrene's palms sweat. We probably need to figure it out your next steps sooner than later." "Agreed." Zalyra's voice steadied. "When the daylight returns, I should locate my ship and assess the damage. If I can salvage communications equipment, I may send out a distress signal to my people." Chiron let out a slow breath, sizing up just how insane the situation had become. A part of him still expected to wake up from this bizarre dream, but Zalyra was as real as the warmth that lingered between them. "You can crash here for the night. Don't try to do anything else until you're fully recovered." She nodded her thanks, the ghost of a smile pulling at her lips. When he gingerly stood, she flexed her limbs experimentally, rising to test her balance. Though she wobbled, she was stable enough. Chiron led her to a small pile of folded clothes in the corner, his own oversized sweatpants and a hoodie that might fit her if she didn't mind rolling up the sleeves. To his surprise, she accepted them with a sense of curiosity rather than discomfort. "I'm guessing you don't keep a suitcase of alien attire on Earth," she teased, voice soft. He almost laughed. "Yeah, fresh out of that. Just try those on, see if they're comfortable." Minutes later, Zalyra emerged from the bathroom wearing the borrowed clothes. They hung loosely on her, but she looked infinitely more at ease than she had in the half-soaked shower curtain. Something about seeing an alien dressed in typical Earth sweats hammered home the sheer absurdity of the night. Chiron made space for her on the couch, offering an extra pillow while he planned to take the recliner. She hesitated, tail twitching uncertainly. "I'm not certain how long I will rest. My physiology might require a different cycle." "That's fine," he said, stifling a yawn. "Try to sleep or meditate or whatever your species does. I'll be here in case you need anything." She regarded him intently. Her gaze carried an intensity that made Chiron wonder if she was studying him far more than he realized. Finally, she lowered herself onto the couch, drawing the blankets close. "Thank you, Chiron," she said softly, "for saving me, for trusting me." He managed a faint smile. "Get some rest, Zalyra." With that, Chiron flipped off the overhead light, leaving only a small lamp to cast the room in gentle shadows. His mind spun with questions he couldn't possibly answer tonight. So he did the only logical thing, put the conversation on hold until morning arrived. Sunlight came pale and weak, filtered through the thick banks of snow clinging to the window. Chiron's alarm buzzed, a jarring intrusion into a night that seemed both impossibly long and shockingly short. He stirred in the recliner, every muscle aching from an awkward half-sleep. Across the room, the couch was empty. At once, a spike of panic lanced through him. Had Zalyra left? Or worse, had something or someone taken her? He was halfway to the door when she appeared from the bathroom, looking comparatively refreshed. She still moved cautiously, as though checking whether her limbs would hold her up in this planet's gravity. But color had returned to her cheeks, and there was an edge of collected determination in her golden stare. "You're up early," he said, blinking groggily. Zalyra nodded, tail flicking in a lazy arc behind her. "I rose before dawn to observe the area through a window. Your storm has weakened." Chiron peered outside. Indeed, the relentless swirl of snow was more gentle flurries now. The roads were still thick with ice, but at least visibility was better. "So you want to head out to your ship?" She sighed. "Yen, I must if there's any hope of retrieving equipment or any evidence of what happened." A tension drummed in Chiron's gut. "You think it's wise to go alone?" "No," she admitted, glancing at him, "but the fewer people involved, the better. If sabotage is at play, I don't want bystanders in danger." He squared his shoulders, shoving sleep from his eyes. "I'm coming with you." It wasn't a request. Fear still churned in his stomach, but some deeper instinct refused to let her go into the unknown alone, especially not when her crash might have been orchestrated. Zalyra's gaze softened in a way he hadn't seen before. "You really are something else, Chiron," she murmured, a faint smile curving her lips. They quickly prepared. Chiron rummaged for gloves, a warm jacket, and boots that might offer traction on snow. He found a hat that fit over Zalyra's unusual hair, well enough to hide her more alien features from casual onlookers. They left the apartment just as dawn broke fully, stepping into a landscape coated in brilliant white. Icy air clawed at their faces, but at least the worst of the wind had settled. In the hush of early morning, the magnitude of their mission crystallized. They weren't just strolling to the grocery store. They were setting out to find a downed alien spacecraft. If it could be repaired, Zalyra's best chance to leave Earth safely relied on them. If it was beyond salvage, the question of how she might contact her people became doubly urgent. That unknown threat, someone who might have sabotaged her vessel, added another layer of danger. If they discovered Zalyra's whereabouts, what might they do to keep her grounded? Walking down the snow-laden streets, they passed only a few early risers attempting to shovel out driveways. Most folks were still hunkered inside, waiting for plows to do their job. Chiron kept a purposeful pace, doing his best to project a calm aura, as if everything was normal. But inside, adrenaline spiked. He couldn't escape the thought that he was about to do something no one else on Earth had likely done before. Approach an honest-to-God alien spaceship. The transition from roads to woodlands was abrupt. One moment, Chiron and Zalyra were navigating icy asphalt lined with cookie-cutter houses and dormant cars. The next, they stepped off a side street where the plowed pavement ended, sinking shin-deep into a drift of fresh snow. Gnarled trees stretched skyward like skeletal arms, their limbs drooping under the weight of frost. A hush fell, broken only by the crunch of boots and the distant crow calls echoing among the branches. Zalyra led the way, scanning the environment with trained precision. Chiron fell in behind her, noting how her posture was tense, eyes shifting warily. She wasn't just looking for the path. She was watching for ambushes, or signs that they weren't alone. More than once she paused, her keen gaze picking out differences in the snow's texture or any suspicious footprints. Time blurred as they trudged deeper. The sky, now a washed-out blue, glimmered between branches, but the thick canopy made it feel like a different world altogether. Finally, they crested a small ridge, and Chiron saw it, a wide, jagged scar in the landscape where something large had crashed. Broken tree trunks lay snapped at odd angles, and uprooted bushes littered the ground. A scattering of blackened, metallic debris hinted that the site they sought was close by. Climbing over the tangled wreckage, Zalyra's breath caught, her tail dropping in dismay. Chiron followed, stepping gingerly over twisted hunks of metal that glinted dully in the cold. And then the ship itself came into view, a sleek, elongated craft half buried in snow and mud, its outer hull scorched in places, battered in others. Even in ruin, its design was elegantly foreign, no sharp corners or rivets, but curved plating that seemed grown rather than built. Chiron's throat felt tight. He couldn't fathom how much technology lay in this single battered vessel. Technology that humanity had only dreamed of. Yet it wasn't the scientific marvel that concerned him right now. It was the damage. Smoke rose faintly from a rear section, sending up a bitter, acrid smell that stung his nose. Zalyra approached the fuselage, resting a hand on a portion of intact plating. "By the stars," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. She circled the craft, searching for an external hatch. Karen kept watch, scanning the tree line, half expecting mysterious agents to appear with guns drawn. The quiet pressed down like a weighted blanket. At last, Zalyra found a hidden panel in the side of the ship. She pressed her palm to it, and to Chiron's amazement, a portion of the hull slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a cramped corridor, cast in flickering emergency lights of pale green. Together they entered, the temperature dropping instantly, as if the ship's interior had become a vacuum for heat. Zalyra guided him along, whispering about the structural layout. Most passages were sealed off due to hull breaches, so they navigated a single main walkway until they reached what looked like a control center. Metal surfaces were scorched and half collapsed. Panels blinked in an erratic pattern, a testament to the vessel's crippled energy supply. She crouched beside a console, attempting to interface with it. Her tail flicked anxiously as she tapped glowing symbols on the panel. "Come on," she whispered, voice taut. "Just give me something. Communications link, distress beacon, anything." After what felt like an eternity, a small readout flickered, alien script dancing across the screen. Zalyra's face fell. "The main power core is severely damaged," she said in a low monotone. "We have partial battery backups, but the communications array is fried. I can't send a signal this way." A threat of helplessness crept into Zalyra's posture. Chiron could almost feel her frustration as she pored over readouts, pressing keys that responded sluggishly to her commands. She muttered curses in her own language, small, sharp words that sounded like chipped glass. Still, there was a glimmer of determination. He scanned the interior, eyes roving over a seat that was likely her pilot's station. It was jammed at an odd angle, overshadowed by a partially crumpled bulkhead. Choking smoke wisped from a corner where something overheated. "Is there anything salvageable?" he asked softly, not wanting to break her concentration, but needing to know. She exhaled. "Some power cells remain. Possibly a portable device. The hull damage is catastrophic. If sabotage was the cause, then whoever orchestrated it aimed to ground me permanently." Zalyra hesitated, flicking her gaze toward him. "Yet you found me first." Chiron suppressed a shiver. If he hadn't answered that desperate knock, she might have frozen to death. The ramifications made his head spin. "Let's gather what we can, then get out of here. The longer we stay, the bigger the chance we attract unwanted attention." Zalyra nodded, rummaging through compartments near the console. She produced a slim cylinder the length of her forearm, faintly glowing from within, and a few smaller devices that appeared to be tool modules or some type of universal translator. With each piece of technology she salvaged, her look of grim resolve deepened. They moved quickly, mindful of any sign that the structural damage might worsen. Every so often, Chiron glanced over his shoulder at the corridor, imagining footsteps echoing down the twisted hall. But no one came. Perhaps they truly were alone, or perhaps they were the only ones foolish enough to step inside a smoldering alien wreck. Unexpectedly, Crisis forged a deeper link between Chiron and Zalyra. Their short time together had been a crash course in mutual dependency. He had offered her warmth and a safe harbor. She trusted him enough to reveal her craft. Now, standing amid the wreckage of her once proud vessel, they realized they had only each other to rely on. In moments of turmoil, that reliance, and the shared adrenaline of an uncertain path, built a connection as potent as any carefully cultivated friendship. Whether it would last beyond the immediate crisis was anyone's guess, but in that moment, it felt like a lifeline. They worked in near silence until Zalyra's arms were full of what few pieces could be pried free. At last, she motioned toward the exit. "This is all I can manage. Let's go." Chiron wasted no time, backtracking through the corridor, weaving around fallen supports and crumpled plating. The star-cold bit through his jacket, and he realized the temperature inside was as merciless as the snowy wilderness outside. When they finally emerged from the ship, stepping into the blinding whiteness of fresh snow, a wave of relief crashed over him. Zalyra clutched the salvaged equipment to her chest, eyes darting around the site one last time. A flicker of regret, or perhaps sorrow, crossed her features. "This was my first solo command," she murmured. "My first assignment beyond the borders of my people's territory. Now it's—" She trailed off, letting the reality sink in. He laid a gentle hand on her shoulder, unsure if the gesture had the same meaning in her culture, but hoping it offered some small comfort. "We'll figure it out," he said. "I'm sorry about your ship, but at least you're still here." She offered a faint, solemn nod, then turned her gaze to the ridge, where a path home, her temporary home, awaited. "Yes, let's return before the next storm or something worse finds us." They managed the trek back with wary haste. The crisp morning air carried the possibility of more snow, and Chiron's pulse hammered with the thought that if sabotage had truly occurred, some unknown threat could be trailing them. Yet the woods remained silent, yielding only the occasional rustle of branches or a startled animal scurrying beneath the drifts. When they reached the outskirts of town, Zalyra adjusted the hat to cover more of her unusual hair. Her tail remained hidden beneath Chiron's oversized hoodie, though it made walking somewhat awkward. They passed a pair of neighbors shoveling sidewalks who barely spared them a glance. An unexpected blessing. Charon mumbled a greeting and the two shovelers nodded back, none the wiser that an extraterrestrial was strolling by. Once safe inside Charon's apartment, they locked the door. Zalyra set the salvage tech on the coffee table, kneeling beside it in intense focus. She started fiddling with the cylindrical power cell, occasionally flipping a switch that bathed the table in flickers of soft purple glow. Charon removed his coat, warming his hands against the heater. "That thing safe?" he asked, motioning at the cylinder with a nod. Zalyra gave a thin smile. "Relatively. It's a short-term backup. If I can wire it to one of these modules, I might create a basic transmitter. Even if it can't reach my homeworld, it might reach a near orbit or any vessel scanning this sector." "Do you think your people are searching for you?" She paused. "It's possible. Standard protocol would call for them to note my disappearance if I miss my designated check-in. But sabotage complicates that scenario. If those who caused this crash wanted me off the grid, they might jam signals or feed misinformation. They might just..." Chiron tried to wrap his head around the notion of an interstellar conspiracy. It was enough to make him feel small and more than a little uneasy. Settling beside Zalyra, he watched as she dismantled a palm-sized device, rearranging tiny glowing components inside. He admired her dexterity, the way her slender fingers moved with practiced skill. Moments later, she attached the reconfigured device to the power cell with a delicate metal filament. A flash of sparks made them both flinch, but Zalyra recovered, adjusting it with a careful twist. The contraption hummed faintly, emitting a subdued light. "Is that it?" Charon asked, half in awe. Zalyra exhaled, brushing hair from her eyes. "It's a start. I'll need to refine the frequency, then activate it. If I'm lucky, someone friendly will hear the signal." A flicker of relief coursed through him. Even if he couldn't fully grasp the scope of the technology, it gave them a chance. "That's incredible." Zalyra's lips formed a small curve, but it wasn't a smile of victory. "We must remain vigilant. If others detect the signal, others who might wish me harm, then we could have trouble." He nodded grimly. "We'll handle it." It was an impossibly brave statement from a man who, a day ago, never imagined meeting an alien, let alone shielding her from unknown dangers. But the resolve in his voice surprised even him. In a short span, Zalyra had gone from a stranger to a reason he was willing to risk everything. "Let's do what we can," Zalyra said, sliding him a grateful look, "and maybe find more of that pizza you spoke of. My people might unify the galaxy if they tasted that." Charon nearly laughed. The memory of her first pizza experience, a brief, wonderful respite from the tension. "We'll order another in a bit," he promised, "but let's first secure our interstellar phone call." Charon closed the blinds, threw the deadbolt on the door, and turned off the overhead lights, leaving only a lamp's soft glow to illuminate the living room. Zalyra tweaked the frequency on her improvised transmitter, occasionally muttering calculations under her breath. Outside, the day remained cold and quiet, but Chiron couldn't shake a feeling that it was just the calm before a storm of a different kind. He paced across the worn carpet, mind churning with new realities. "So," he ventured, "if you do get a signal out, how exactly will your people find us? Or more specifically, how do we keep it discreet?" Zalyra set down a micro tool, looking at him with frank seriousness. "We can mask the signal to low strength so that only a vessel close to orbit can detect it. It lowers the odds of drawing unwanted attention, but also lowers the odds of success." Their gazes locked, a silent acknowledgement that they were playing a high-stakes game. She returned to her adjustments, and for a stretch, the apartment was filled with only the gentle hiss of the furnace and the occasional crackle of static from the device. Charon took the moment to reflect on the swirl of improbabilities that led him here. Less than 24 hours ago, he was a random guy who disliked winter. Now he might inadvertently become Earth's first contact with an alien species, if they weren't already around, hidden. After some time, Zalyra sighed, flipping a small switch on the cylinder. The device emitted a steady pulse that resonated like a hummingbird's wing beat. Her tail gave a satisfied flick. "That should do it," she said, leaning back. "Now we wait. If a friendly vessel passes close enough, we'll get a ping on the console here." She tapped a makeshift readout she'd rigged up on a leftover phone screen Chiron had lying around. He settled on the couch, clearing space among the blankets and pillows. Zalyra joined him, though she seemed reluctant to fully relax. She was, after all, in uncharted territory, physically and metaphorically. Chiron, she said, voice thoughtful, have you told anyone else about me? He shook his head. Who would I tell? And if I did, I imagine the government or someone else would swoop in. I don't think that'd be safe for you. Her expression softened. You protect me. Even though we met only hours ago, you act as though my well-being is yours to safeguard. He let out a gentle snort. Don't read too much into it. I'm just not the type to leave someone to freeze or get captured by some shady group. A smile, faint but real, touched her lips. On my world, we have a belief that crossing paths in times of crisis forges a bond that can't be replicated any other way. I think Earth must share a similar sentiment. Charon's chest felt tight. Without thinking too hard, he reached over and gave her hand a small squeeze. Her skin was far warmer than it was the night before, and that small sign of recovery made relief thrum through him. Well, I guess that's us, he murmured. In that tranquil hush, a beep sounded from the console, making them both jump. Zalyra snatched it up, eyes widening. A string of alien scripts scrolled across the tiny screen. Her gaze flickered with excitement and worry all at once. There's a ship in low orbit, she breathed. They're reading my signal. Adrenaline spiked through Chiron. Is it your people? Zalyra tried to interpret the flashing symbols. Potentially, the codes are partially scrambled, but they have similarities to my faction's encryption. They might be trying to maintain stealth. He swallowed, every hair on his arm standing on end. So, that's good, right? Before Zalyra could answer, the device whined, a flicker of pale light dancing across the readout. A noise that could be static, or alien voices, rippled from within, too garbled to decipher. The look Zalyra gave him was charged with hope and dread in equal measure. We're about to find out, she said, her breath catching slightly. Charon nodded, the magnitude of this moment spiraling. If that orbiting ship was friendly, they might rescue Zalyra or at least get her off Earth safely. If it wasn't, they might have just led the enemy straight to her location. He took a steadying breath and found her hand again, anchoring them both in the swirl of tension. No matter what, we face it together, he said, voice low and determined. Zalyra's grip tightened. Yes, together. And in that fragile flicker of unity, they braced for whatever reply came from the stars. The next few heartbeats felt like hours as Chiron and Zalyra watched the flickering readout. Every pulse of light hinted at possible rescue or looming disaster. Zalyra's tail twitched in restless anticipation, while Chiron tightened his grip around her hand, silently promising that they would face whatever came next together. Their improvised console emitted a soft crackle, punctuated by bursts of static that threatened to reveal a distorted voice at any moment. Before the tension could snap, thanks for staying with us on this incredible journey. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so you never miss an update on our latest stories. Give us a thumbs up if you're loving the twist so far, and please share your insights in the comments. We're excited to hear your thoughts and see where you're listening from. A sudden burst of garbled words echoed through the device. Someone was definitely reaching out. Chiron and Zalyra leaned in closer, bracing themselves for the message that could change everything.